The Ghosts of Alcatraz, The Impossible Vanishing. Prologue. The Head on the Pillow. June 12, 1962, 7:15 a.m. The morning fog sat heavy over the San Francisco Bay, wrapping the island of Alcatraz in a suffocating gray shroud. Inside the main cell house, the sounds of the morning routine began to stir. The clanging of steel, the shuffling of boots, the murmur of the waking damned. Guard Bill Long was conducting the morning head count. He moved down B block, checking the barred cells one by one. Routine. Boredom. This was the Rock, the inescapable fortress of the United States federal prison system. It housed the worst of the worst: Al Capone, Machine Gun Kelly, the Birdman. No one had ever successfully escaped. 36 men had tried, in 14 separate attempts. 23 were caught, 6 were shot dead, and 2 drowned. The statistics were absolute. Long stopped at cell 138. Frank Morris. The inmate was still sleeping, his blanket pulled up to his chin, his head turned towards the wall. "Morris, wake up!" Long shouted, rattling his baton against the bars. No movement. "Morris, drop him!" Still nothing. Irritated, Long unlocked the cell door and stepped inside. He reached out to shake the prisoner's shoulder. "Get up, Morris, or you're going to the—" As he pushed the pillow, the head didn't just move. It detached. It rolled off the bed and hit the floor with a hollow, papery thud. Long froze. He wasn't looking at a human face. He was staring at a grotesque mask made of plaster, soap, and concrete dust, painted with flesh-tone paint from an art kit and topped with real human hair gathered from the prison barber shop. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced the guard's chest. He ran to the adjacent cells, 150 and 152. The Anglin brothers, John and Clarence. Empty. Dummy heads in both beds. The sirens began to wail, a sound that echoed across the cold waters to the sleeping city of San Francisco. The Rock had been breached. The impossible had happened. 3 men had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only ghosts made of paper and hair. Chapter 1. The Brain and the Brawn. To understand the escape, one must understand the architect. Frank Morris, inmate AZ-1441, was not your typical thug. Orphaned at 11, he had spent his life in and out of foster homes and reform schools. But beneath the criminal record lay a terrifying intellect. Morris had an IQ of 133, ranking him in the top 2% of the population. He was observant, patient, and quiet. While other prisoners flexed their muscles, Morris flexed his mind. He saw patterns where others saw chaos. He arrived at Alcatraz in January 1960. He looked at the crumbling concrete walls eroded by the salt air and didn't see a cage. He saw an opportunity. His partners were John and Clarence Anglin. They were bank robbers from Georgia, brothers who knew how to swim and who knew how to keep their mouths shut. They were practical, handy, and fiercely loyal to each other. A fourth man, Alan West, was also part of the plot. He was the mechanic, the man who knew the infrastructure. Together, they formed a silent pact. They weren't just going to run, they were going to engineer a miracle. Chapter 2. The Sound of Accordions. The plan began in December 1961. It required tools they didn't have, access they were denied, and time they couldn't afford. Their target was the ventilation grills at the back of their cells. The grills measured 6 by 9 inches, too small for a man. They needed to widen the holes into the service corridor behind the cell block. But how do you chip away concrete in a prison where guards patrol every hour? The answer lay in music. Alcatraz allowed inmates an hour of music in the evenings. While inmates strummed guitars and blew into harmonicas, the noise level in B Block rose to a cacophony. Under the cover of this noise, Morris and the Anglins worked. They built a drill. It was a masterpiece of prison engineering. They stole a motor from a broken vacuum cleaner. They sharpened a metal spoon handle into a drill bit. They connected it to the motor and used the prison's electrical outlet. The sound was masked by the accordions. Night after night, millimeter by millimeter, they bored into the wall. They made fake grill covers out of cardboard and painted them to look like metal, hiding their work during the day. But digging was only half the battle. They needed a way off the island. The water temperature of San Francisco Bay averaged 50 to 54 degrees Fahrenheit, or 10 to 12 degrees Celsius. The currents ripped through the Golden Gate at 6 knots. Swimming was suicide. They needed a boat. They stole raincoats, 50 of them. John Anglin worked in the prison clothing exchange. Over months, he smuggled out rubberized raincoats. In a secret workshop they set up on top of the cell block, a blind spot for the guards. They stitched the raincoats together, using the heat from steam pipes to vulcanize the rubber seams. They were building a 6 by 14-foot inflatable raft and life vests. It was meticulous, agonizing work. One slip-up, one loose tongue, one curious guard, and it would all be over. Chapter 3. The Night of the Ghosts. June 11, 1962, 9:30 p.m. Lights out. The signal was given. Morris whispered to the others, "Tonight." They placed the dummy heads on their pillows. They stuffed towels under the blankets to mimic the shape of sleeping bodies. Morris slid the fake grill cover aside. He squeezed his body through the widened hole into the dark, plumbing-filled utility corridor behind the cells. The Anglin brothers followed. But Alan West was in trouble. The cement around his grill had hardened, or perhaps he hadn't chipped enough away. He pushed and pulled, sweating in the dark, but the grill wouldn't budge. He was stuck. From the other side of the wall, Morris waited. He hissed, "West, come on!" "I can't," West whispered back, panic rising. "It's stuck." Morris waited as long as he could, but the schedule was tight. With a heavy heart, or perhaps cold calculation, Morris signaled the Anglins. They had to leave West behind. The three men climbed the plumbing pipes up 30 feet to the ceiling of the cell block. They forced open a ventilation shaft, severing the rivets they had weakened months ago. They emerged onto the roof of the prison. The view was breathtaking and terrifying. Across the bay, the lights of San Francisco twinkled like diamonds, so close, yet a world away. They were exposed. Searchlights swept the grounds. They moved like shadows, crouching low, scurrying across the roof to the north end. They shimmied down a 50-foot bake shop pipe, their palms burning against the cold metal. They hit the ground in a blind spot near the power plant. They crept past the guard tower. The guard apparently was looking the other way or dozing off. They reached the water's edge. The smell of salt and freedom filled their lungs. They inflated the raft using a concertina, a small accordion-like instrument converted into a pump. At approximately 10 o'clock p.m., Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin pushed their patchwork raft into the icy, churning black water of the bay. They vanished into the fog. They were never seen again. Chapter 4. The Manhunt Begins. When the siren wailed the next morning, chaos erupted. Warden Olin Blackwell was summoned from his vacation. The FBI, the Coast Guard, the state police, every agency mobilized. Helicopters chopped through the mist. Cutters sliced through the water. Alan West, still in his cell, finally managed to kick his grill open the next morning, but it was too late. He returned to his bed and waited for the guards. When interrogated, he spilled everything. "They're going to Angel Island," West claimed. "Then they'll steal a car and drive apart." The FBI swarmed Angel Island. They found nothing. No raft, no footprints, no stolen cars. 2 days later, a paddle was found floating near Angel Island. Then a plastic bag wrapped in hermetically sealed plastic containing a wallet with photos of the Anglin's family. Then a shredded piece of raincoat material. But no bodies. The currents of the bay are treacherous. Bodies usually surface after a few days, or they wash out to sea. Did they drown? The FBI concluded they did. The water was freezing, the raft was flimsy. Hypothermia would set in within 20 minutes. But mysteries have a way of refusing to die. There were reports. A stolen blue Chevrolet in Marin County that night. A sighting of 3 men matching their descriptions. The Anglin family received flowers anonymously every Mother's Day for years. At the funeral of an Anglin family member years later, 2 strange, tall women in heavy makeup attended, didn't speak to anyone, and left. Were they John and Clarence in drag? Epilogue. The letter. In 2013, the San Francisco Police Department received a handwritten letter. The ink was shaky. The tone was desperate. "My name is John Anglin. I escaped from Alcatraz in June 1962 with my brother Clarence and Frank Morris. I'm 83 years old and in bad shape. I have cancer. Frank passed away in October 2005. His grave is in Alexandria under another name. My brother died in 2011. If you announce on TV that I will be promised to first go to jail for no more than a year and get medical attention, I will write back to let you know exactly where I am. This is no joke." The FBI analyzed the letter for fingerprints. Inconclusive. They analyzed the handwriting. Inconclusive. Was it real? Was John Anglin still alive, living out his final days in freedom, having beaten the unbeatable rock? The U.S. Marshal Service keeps the case open to this day. They have said, "We will look for them until they turn 100. Alcatraz is now a ruin, a tourist attraction, where visitors stare at the dummy heads still resting on the pillows in cell 13. The wind howls through the broken windows, whispering the same question it has whispered for 60 years. Did they make it? In the annals of American history, the escape remains the ultimate vanishing act, a triumph of human will against stone and steel. Whether they died in the water or lived in the shadows, Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers achieved the one thing the prison was designed to deny them. They became legends. The Ghosts of Alcatraz, Part 2. The Hunt for Ghosts, Dead or Alive. Chapter 5. Anatomy of a Deception. June 12, 1962, 10 a.m. While the Coast Guard cutters churned the waters of the bay, FBI agents stood inside cell 138, staring at a masterpiece of deception. Special Agent Frank Price picked up the dummy head from Frank Morris's pillow. It was terrifyingly realistic in the dim prison light. Up close, however, the genius of the construction revealed itself. The base was a mixture of soap, toothpaste, concrete dust, and toilet paper, a homemade papier-mâché that had been sculpted with the precision of a Renaissance artist. The flesh tone was achieved using paints from the prison art kits. But the hair was the pièce de résistance. It wasn't synthetic. It was human hair, swept from the floor of the prison barber shop, carefully glued strand by strand onto the skull. "Look at this," Price muttered to his partner, pointing at the wall. The ventilation grill, which looked solid from the hallway, was actually a piece of cardboard. Morris had painted it to mimic the metal slats and the shadows behind them. When the agents removed the false grill, they found the hole. It was jagged, barely 10 inches wide. Inside the utility corridor, they found the drill. The motor from the vacuum cleaner was crude but functional. The agents marveled at the sheer audacity of it. The noise of the drilling had been masked by the nightly accordion hours. But the dust? They found that Morris had been flushing the concrete dust down the toilet or scattering it in the yard during his walks, a handful at a time, like the Great Escape. They also found a magazine in Morris's cell, Popular Mechanics. Inside, an article detailed the principles of buoyancy and raft construction. The plan hadn't been a gamble. It was an engineering thesis brought to life. Chapter 6. The Tides of Death. The FBI's working theory was simple. They drowned. To prove this, they turned to the science of the San Francisco Bay. The tides on the night of June 11 were fierce. High tide had peaked at 10:30 p.m. If the men had entered the water at 10 p.m., the outgoing tide, the ebb, would have been ripping out towards the Pacific Ocean at nearly 6 knots. If they hit the water then, a Coast Guard expert explained to the warden, they didn't go to Angel Island. They were sucked right out under the Golden Gate Bridge and into the ocean. This theory was bolstered on July 17, 1962. A Norwegian freighter, the SS Norafell, was entering the bay. The crew spotted a body floating in the water, about 20 miles northwest of the Golden Gate Bridge. The body was clothed in what looked like full-length denim trousers, prison issue. The crew didn't retrieve the body, but they radioed the report. By the time the Coast Guard arrived, the body was gone, claimed by the deep. Was it Frank Morris? The FBI felt confident. Case closed, they thought. Nature did the executioner's job. But then, the cracks in the drowning theory began to appear. Chapter 7. The Blue Chevy. The plan, according to the informant Alan West, was to land on Angel Island, rest, and then swim the short distance to the Marin County mainland. There, they would steal a car and clothes. Official police reports from Marin County on the morning of June 12 tell a troubling story. A 1955 blue Chevrolet was reported stolen in Marin County hours after the escape. 3 men were reportedly seen driving a blue Chevrolet in the Stockton area later that day. Stockton is roughly 80 miles east of San Francisco, exactly where the Anglin brothers had family. The FBI investigated the stolen car report, but dismissed it as unrelated. However, for the U.S. Marshals, who would later take over the case, this was the smoking gun. If they drowned, who stole the car? If they drowned, why did the car theft occur exactly where they planned to land? Chapter 8. The Brazil Connection. The case went cold for decades. The file gathered dust. But the Anglin family never stopped believing. Every year, without fail, the Anglin mother received a bouquet of flowers on her birthday. No card, no signature, just flowers. When the mother died in 1973, the flowers stopped, but attendants at the funeral raised eyebrows. Witnesses reported 2 incredibly tall women in heavy veils attending the service in Florida. They spoke to no one. They vanished as soon as the service ended. The Anglin brothers were known to be tall men. But the biggest bombshell dropped in 2015. The Anglin family produced a photograph. It was a grainy, color photo, allegedly taken in Brazil in 1975. The photo shows 2 men standing next to a termite mound on a farm. They look older, their hairlines receding, wearing sunglasses. The family claimed the photo was given to them by a childhood friend of the Anglins, a man named Fred Bridzi, who was a drug smuggler. Bridzi claimed he ran into the brothers in Rio de Janeiro. They were living under false names, owning a farm. Forensic analysts looked at the photo. They measured the ear structure, the distance between the eyes, the forehead slope. The conclusion? A highly likely match. If the photo is real, John and Clarence Anglin didn't just survive, they thrived. They pulled off the greatest bank robbery in history, robbing the government of their own lives, and retired to South America. Chapter 9. The Last Marshal. Today, the case file sits on the desk of U.S. Marshal Michael Dyke, retired, but the torch has been passed. The FBI closed their case in 1979, handing jurisdiction to the marshals. The marshals are the hunters who never sleep. "I have a warrant," Marshal Dyke famously said, "and that warrant doesn't expire until they are dead or in cuffs." Modern technology has been thrown at the mystery. Computer models of the Bay currents suggest that if the men left between 11 p.m. and midnight, contrary to the FBI's initial timeline, the tides would have actually pushed them back toward the Golden Gate Bridge, but allowed them to hit the Marin headlands precisely where the blue Chevy was stolen. In 2018, the letter from John Anglin, mentioned in the prologue, was analyzed for DNA. The stamp was licked, but the DNA was too degraded to get a match. The opportunity slipped away. Conclusion: the empty cage. If John Anglin is alive today, he would be over 90 years old. Frank Morris would be over 95. Most likely, they are dead now. Time is the one prison no one escapes. But their legacy is immortal. They are the only ghosts in American history who have no graves. Did they die shivering in the cold Pacific, their lungs filling with salt water? Or did they die old men in Brazil, sipping caipirinhas, watching the sun set, and laughing at the memory of a papier-mâché head on a pillow? The cells at Alcatraz are cold today. The paint is peeling. But if you listen closely to the wind whistling through the vents of B Block, you don't hear the screams of the damned. You hear the faint, rhythmic sound of a spoon scraping against concrete. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The sound of freedom.